You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast, and this week is part 2 of 2, maybe 3, depending on how you want to look at it, of our GenCon retrospective. And this is basically us taking a look at what the actual show itself looks like as a vendor. Now that, episode 1, we covered the lead up. Now 2, here it is.
The show itself.
Let's dive into the nitty-gritty. The show is here. We're doing our thing, vending, eating, sleeping, whatever the case is. And with that, let's get it started.
Yep. So one of the most important things to know about GenCon, the show itself, for the 4 and change days that you're going to be there, not just the hall hours, but the hours that the area that you will be working in are going to be open. As we mentioned last year, there are a number of places that a vendor can be inside GenCon. If you want to consider it lucky enough to be inside the gaming room, that is a 24-hour room, I believe, which means you can run your booth how you want. If you are in other halls, there are another set of hours to adhere to. So let's say the main hall, right?
Yeah.
That's where you were this year?
Yes, main vendor hall,
Yep.
which was 10 to 6 technically for the public.
Yep.
Now, there was a 30-minute early access for VIP, as well as anyone that qualifies for ADA assistance.
Okay.
So wheelchair, cane, prosthesis, anything like that, you got to come in 30 minutes early.
Yep, which is standard fare. We got that at anime cons as well, which is why we wanted to be there early. VIP access for a lot of the anime cons also extends to artists, people who are hosting or presenting on panels, because they may not get the chance to wander. Sometimes they don't want to be seen wandering if they are that kind of person, so it is a familiar opportunity. And otherwise, it just seems kind of like standard hours. This year, however, something that I noticed that was a little different, and I don't know if you knew anything about the hours, was in Lucas Oil Stadium, where the Indianapolis Colts played, out on the field, they were having, was it events or another vendor village?
It was events.
Okay.
And what was really different this year was, in years prior, Lucas Oil was a LARPing arena.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that started in about 2016 and went till 2019, where they would do LARP events in Lucasfield, which I thought was pretty sick.
Yeah.
LARPing is not my thing at all, but the ability to do it on a football field was just awesome. Like, it would seem awesome to me if I were into that, because I am a sucker for football.
Or just watch it, because, like, if you've never been to a football stadium...
The stage is amazing.
Yeah, if you've never been to a football stadium before or had the opportunity to sit in the seats when it's not, like, fully occupied or close to capacity, it's actually a really cool experience just to be
It really is.
there. Would definitely recommend. So I didn't know that was the LARPing area previously, so that's kind of that's fun and interesting. Now, if you are working the regular hall, 10 to 6, you have your set number of employees that you can effectively rotate through. So you're going to be able to kind of schedule breaks, and you want to have those throughout the day. You want to try and adhere, because if you don't give your people breaks, the grind of Gen Con will definitely get to you. Yeah, you can't just kind of use your escapism for bathroom breaks to take time off. So when you are taking a break at Gen Con, you now enter Gen Pop, and you are effectively a salmon swimming upstream. How easy is it to actually commit to something like getting food?
So the first day, it can be rough. And the reason I say that is you don't really know the bead of the hall when it's busy, when there's a lull. And obviously the easy answer is, it's just always busy. Well, sure, but your food options at Gen Con are kind of interesting. So obviously you have the glut of restaurants in downtown Indianapolis.
Yep.
You also have, and this is my personal favorite, the Convention Center concession stand, because they have Convention Center nachos, and I love cancer cheese.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, the really cool thing is every year for Gen Con, they do what's called a food truck village. And it used to be in like there's basically an area of downtown Indianapolis right outside the convention center where it's like a cobblestone street. And it used to just be packed with food trucks. Well, what they actually did this year was they blocked off the entire street between the convention center and Lucas Oil. That's where the food truck village was. So one of the things you have to account for when you're setting these breaks aside is it's not a 30-minute break because you're in line for 30 minutes.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's probably like an hour
hour
to 2-hour break, depending on where you decide to go.
Yep.
And that's something you have to plan for. Now, after day one, you can kind of get a feel for when specific areas are going to be busy and when they're not. For example, the food truck area from 3 to 5 was dead every day. It's not because there was a glut of panels or a glut of events at that time. It's just, if you think about it, that's the window between lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
So as a vendor, I bring this to every event, I'll bring a giant can of cashews, just because they're one of my favorite booth snacks. They're loaded with protein, so they can give you energy if you need it. You can eat them for 5 seconds or 5 minutes and be fine either way. So I'd, munch on cashews until about 3 o'clock. And then it was, okay, hey guys, I'm gonna go take an hour. I'm going to head over to the food truck village, grab my burger or
Whatever
soba noodles or whatever the case is, and then come back. And that's one of the interesting things about really your bigger cons like Gen Con and anime cons compared to your Magic events. Like at Magic events, you've got to stealth your stuff into the hall in a suitcase. Gen Con, they didn't give a fuck. Just bring your food in.
Yep.
Didn't matter. You can stay and eat at the food trucks, which is what I chose to do because it was actually kind of nice out for some of the days. But that's usually the way it goes at those events is you have to plan for your break being longer, not because your break is longer, but because you spend an entire normal break waiting in line.
Yeah. This kind of convention strategy for lunches is different than I've also experienced at Magic events in the sense that the Magic convention centers are generally located within walking distance to a few different food options that have mobile apps, so you can just throw in your order for everybody.
Yeah.
Send one person to go get them, and then that's that. You figure out where you're going to eat, and you just like tag in and out to go eat. When you have a convention like Gen Con or even something smaller like Anime Boston, that's not really an option because all those places are slammed. You get a magnitude of like 10 times more people at these events than you do a Magic event. So you can't just kind of pull that same gig. You can't just mass order. And this is something we'll kind of get to later, but one of the things I never got to experience was attempting to figure out the dinner schedule because, again, you're competing with everybody else. So if you want to do reservations, you have to do that in advance. And for me, that stuff is usually part of what the show lead does. So it's already taken care of. They have it basically planned out, so I've never had to worry about it. Aside from Anime Expo, at that point you're just in downtown LA, so you can float through whatever the hell you want.
Whatever.
But one of the things that I don't know if you get to do at Gen Con because it seems more like Anime Expo and it's just wire to wire, but is there ever an opportunity to actually, aside from after you get in those 30 minutes, when it's just VIPs, can you walk the floor?
So I'm always big at every booth I work at that, if you want to go experience the event, we'll figure out a way to do it. It's you walk the floor when it's slow.
Yeah.
Well, there's no slow period at Anime Expo, at a PAX, at a Gen Con, at a Dragon Con. There just isn't. Nope. It's just wall to wall, nuts slammed. But if you've never been to one of those events, I want to make sure as a booth lead you can experience that because it is cool to see.
Yeah.
Experience the other side because you basically enjoy it a lot more then if you're not just locked behind the booth and dealing with the people that walk up to you. So there is walking the floor when it's, quote, slow. And a lot of times what will end up happening is, rather than taking an hour for your break, I'll take like an hour and a half. Take 20, 30 minutes, walk around, see what you want to see because admittedly, those first 30 minutes, or hour or whatever, when everyone's there setting up, especially at Gen Con, you actually can't get transactions done. A lot of booths, because quantities are limited, because there's promos, there's stuff like that, they actually don't let people go in before the general open at 9:30. So you don't really have that time to walk around and check it out,
Okay.
depending on how you get along with the booth or what booth it is. Like if you go to Kingdom Death Monster, which is like a boutique board game, they have Gen Con giveaways.
Oh.
You're not getting anything unless you're coming after open.
Got it. Yeah.
But a lot of booths also, if they're for board games or stuff, hey, look, you're here before vendor setup. Don't worry about it. I can't give you the promo, but I can sell you a copy of the game, no problem. And that's where a lot of that stuff gets done as well. But the thing is, I can't leave my booth unattended with the inventory in it. So you only let 1 or 2 people a day go, but you do let them go.
For sure.
And that's another way that you can get it done, is in that little window prior to open.
Yep. Yeah. Now, that's generally what we've done. Anime Boston's a small enough show that if the way we started scheduling our arrival and our setup, we could basically walk the floor on Thursday, because we would get in midday, and the only booths that wouldn't be set up were like Funimation and Crunchyroll. And then to actually experience the event or buy anything that we wanted, where we actually had to spend time at a booth in line, we do it on Sunday, because as the gaming vendor at an anime con like that, we're not doing last minute Sunday buys like a lot of other booths are. We've done a lot of our work already ahead of time, and Sundays mainly meant to be flipping, so we can afford to lose somebody for half an hour or so as they go wander the floor. At Anime Expo, it's different. That event is wire to wire. It's like 100,000 people, and it's 4 days, I believe. I can't remember. It just feels like infinity.
Yeah, 4 or 5, I think. Yeah.
And day 2, when we get in early, like everybody else, to set up the booth. But it's also so that we can actually go see what's been set up, because aside from that time period to go wander when you have your VIPs in the room or dedicated vendor setup times, there's no opportunity to wander the floor unless the hall is closed at end of day. Even going to the bathroom is like a minute's long slog.
Yep.
Especially
even if you're next to the bathroom.
Yep, exactly. And you don't have the opportunity to lose somebody at the booth for that long, because there are just so many people there all the time. And that's kind of how I felt Gen Con would be, especially when you're kind of running a leaner staff. You can't just like you said, you can't just let everybody go all the time. But also, you don't have to wait that long to start letting people go. If you wanted to give them a little longer and a lunch break or whatever earlier, it seems like that was possible.
Yeah.
And your days are also shorter. It's the 8-hour 10 to 6, like you said. So you're not doing that GP grind, the Magic Fest grind. Things are a little bit easier overall. And you might have the opportunity to pick and choose while you're working. Say, okay, I actually know, like, I want to visit this booth and this booth and this booth, and I can wait until closer towards end of day. I can wait towards Sunday. I could talk to somebody on my way to the bathroom, see if they'll hang around when the hall closes, and do my dealings then. Because that was, when that is possible, ASEN, that was definitely possible. For whatever reason, at Anime Central, the events there were so like off time that the vendor hall would technically be open for like 2 hours after it closed to public, and it would just be the vendors floating around. And as anybody who's ever worked in an event and read this contract knows, you can't be a carnival barker at your booth. You can't really just blast music at your booth at most conventions either. But that's when like the music would hit at ASEN. Like the doors would close, the music would come on at various booths.
Immediately.
Yep. And people would just start milling around. We did a ton of deals like that. That was like the vendor-to-vendor time was every day after the doors closed at ASEN. So it's like stuff feels a little bit different at each con as well. Now, when the day ends at Gen Con, you are, as vendors, released back into the wild, like I said earlier, with everybody else. You've got to figure out what to do. When we were at Magic Fests in Indianapolis, it was like, okay, we need to try and weasel our way into Buca di Beppo or into...
Bobbity Booby.
Or, what's the Brazilian steakhouse that's there? Fogo?
Fogo de Chao.
Fogo de Chao. Yeah. And again, you're fighting with everybody else because these are known spots. And in ASEN, it was a little bit different. The hotels were structured a little bit differently. We could actually just go chill at the pool at the hotel until like 8 when because we would just set reservations for later on in the evening, because as vendors, like, we're not going to any like dances or after parties or whatever, so we
Yeah.
could afford to eat dinner a little later, but we would just go back to the hotel. At Gen Con, when the day is over, like, what does it look like for you guys?
So, and this kind of blends into, the next question a little bit, which is after hours, what is there to do?
Yeah.
So the thing about Gen Con as opposed to a lot of other events, and this is true of really most of the large events out there that you'll ever attend, it's a lot more individual, right? People expect you to go do your own thing because it's a massive event. There's stuff for everyone. It's not like a Magic Con where it's like, all right, there's just Magic and the hall is closed and the event is over.
Yep.
Gen Con's a 24/7 event. There's a ton of panels. There's a ton of parties and stuff that you can go to. One of the really interesting things is at this point, most of us that I work with have been doing events for so long that our restaurants we go to are like the off the beaten path places that people just don't remember.
Yep.
Or they don't go to. For example, Asian Harbor is a place in Indianapolis that offers like authentic Chinese food, not the Americanized version. There's never a line. You get in, you get your food, you get out. We go to places like that.
Okay.
And then there's, depending on how the day is, how you're feeling, maybe some go back to the hotel and process, or, hey, I'm going to go back in and play. There was, I think it was Friday night this year, we played Alpha Big Deck, where everyone plays off the same 250 stack of Alpha cards. Which is a unique experience you can only get at Gen Con. And that's kind of why it's, hey, what are you doing tonight? What are you doing tonight? Where are you going? What are you getting into? And it is a lot more of like a curated experience for yourself that you set up.
Okay.
For example, me, dinner every night is Harry and Izzy's. I get an incredibly good charred rare steak.
Yep.
It's raw in the middle and mooing and crisp burnt edges on the outside. They do a really good job. So every night I'm there, I try to do that. Then there's a cocktail bar that I go to down the street that makes a really good slow gin fizz. Can't help it. I've got a routine. That's what I like.
Yeah.
Other people, I have friends that it's werewolf. They'll vend all day and then they're literally playing werewolf until they pass out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just kind of how those events go. It is such a curated experience for the individual that most vendors are just like, I don't care what you do. Be here at 9. You're on your own.
Okay. Yeah. Just bring me the receipts.
Yeah. Bring me the receipts unless you're going to the ballet or something.
Yeah.
They're professional dancers there. Then just be here at 9 a.m. and that's all we care about.
Yeah. So, like talking about that curated experience, especially as a vendor, is Gen Con the kind of event where like after you're done with your evening, you've wound down, are you going to actually like go back and reprice your buys? Like we talked about this last week, like that's something that a vendor like Troll is able to do because Kentucky or Corbin, Kentucky to Indianapolis is nothing. So
just a direct pipeline.
And they ship people up there to just do nothing but reprice in hotel rooms.
So I think the big important thing here is you do have some people that do, and it's really based on like, what did we go through today? Because if I sold through a ton of inventory and I have no choice but to start processing, I'm going to take a break to process.
Okay.
If I have enough inventory that it doesn't matter, I can just get away with, we'll figure it out later.
Got it, yeah.
I'm absolutely going to do that.
Okay.
Because it is, it's an event that everyone plans for the whole year. So when it comes time to have the event, you want to enjoy it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Now, some people are they enjoy processing cards. I don't understand that. That's not me, but power to you if you're one of them. So that's just what they do when they get home.
Yeah. No, like it just plays into like, okay, the day's over. What are you going to like? How are you going to start your evening? And then what are you going to do after hours? Because, like you said, it's your experience. It's what the experience you want to have. It's the experience that as a booth owner, operator, you're going to allow your employees to have. And then what the expectation is for both like restocking / booth upkeep and then responsibility for getting to the booth the next morning and working your shift. So like we touched on both of those already. There's nothing more that you guys really do in after hours.
No, not really.
All right. So there are events that happen in the after hours is weird to think about in terms of Gen Con, but after the hall closes, there's the charity auction. We mentioned that a couple episodes ago. And the charity auction, in my mind, is fairly infamous at Gen Con because you have some like weird artifacts that go up there.
You do.
in my mind, you don't really know. Like, you've got an idea when the auction's going to happen, but it's in the wee hours of the evening, but you don't really know
Yep.
it's going to go up. So it's either be there or don't kind of thing. Send a proxy, whatever. So, like, how do you actually find out about the auction? Is it truly advertised at Gen Con, or is it just something that's kind of word of mouth?
It's a little bit of both, right? So there's, they obviously advertise, oh, this is, there's this charity auction or whatever. So people know about it. The big difference is auction order and items. Now, that stuff is generally all word of mouth. And what it is like Brusso puts some items up for auction. So he tells Hatsa and Jeremy and a few other people in the know.
Yep.
They tell other people in the know, and then it spreads out from there.
Okay.
And that's when it's like, okay, well, what time is that stuff going to be up? All right, I'm going to go for that.
Oh, okay.
Now, one of the interesting things that they started doing is now they call it the consignment room. And it's basically the auction hall, but it's all stuff that's on consignment.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't quite get to auction, and a lot of it can be incredibly undervalued, and a lot of it is people just overvaluing their stuff. So this year, the consignment hall had some incredibly unique pieces of gaming history in it that typically would go to auction, but they would be the kind of items that might get lost in the hubbub of the general auction because it's just like, a Heritage or a Probstein or something like that auction where you may have 3,000 items and there are 100 that are absolutely insane. You will never find them ever again in your life. Here's the handwritten copy of the first edition AD&D rulebook by Gary Gygax. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. And the consignment room is kind of turned into where a lot of the second tier items start going now, where they may have their Thunder stolen by the admittedly like lifetime Grail piece items, but they're still really cool and have a market. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see the advertisement of here's when the charity auction is. Everybody knows when it is. And then it's what's in the auction and what's of interest is a lot more word of mouth.
Okay, got it. So like there's no like program per se for the day that you would get ahead of time. Yeah,
no.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, that's one thing that people can do, regardless of who you are at Gen Con, Gen Pop vendor, etc. You can go to the auction, and it's a con, so there are going to be after parties. We talked about this a little bit when we discussed the national and what's available basically only to vendors.
Yeah.
So similarly at Gen Con, is there a split between like vendor only events and not?
So, kind of. It's really less vendor only and more stuff that's like seminars that are clearly designed to benefit a vendor or an LGS or something like that. There aren't industry invite onlys. It wasn't like Ravensburger said, hey, everyone come out, that's a vendor, come to our Lorcana party. We're going to have 1 million puzzles that nobody cares about. And then Lorcana. It was mostly like, oh, here's a seminar on how to curate a market in your store or a community in your store. I'm going to go to that because one of two things happens. Either this guy has some really good points or they're all awful and I know not to follow those.
Okay, yeah.
And either way, it's kind of like a learning experience, right? And that's kind of more the focus of Gen Con. It's more of, it's here if you want it. Come find whatever you want. We've got it all.
Yep.
And it's entirely up to you if you explore any of it. And if you don't, hey, no sweat off our back. You do your thing. And so there's not really those invite-only things that you necessarily see at other types of events. So that's one of the big differences.
That feels more in line with my experiences going to, like, everything else that I've ever done. You look at anime, at like any anime convention, and there are like infinity after parties that are advertised, a small number that aren't, and those are like invite only or in the know only.
Yeah.
And then even like the Magic Fest stuff. You look at what they're doing now at the Mythic Championships, and everything is known. It's just whether or not you want to buy in or you're lucky enough to hit the raffle spot. But it's all available, and there's nothing ever really vendor specific at any of that stuff. Like that's more for the national, like we talked about, where some of those OEMs want to bring vendors out and show them a good time and thank them for being there. Yeah. Or sometimes at Comic-Cons, like when Funko was really trying to push their product, they did a lot of industry events
A ton.
where they would have like an entire experience set up off site. Sometimes that does happen, but it seems to be
Yeah.
less common than your Gen Pop stuff.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we talked about already is how you want to schedule your night. You know, as your booth lead, you know, you just let your employees kind of run free, get back here for your shift, work it. That's all we ask for. So sleep is just found where it can be.
Yeah, pretty much. And, there's the other nice thing is, again, kind of depending on how your booth is staffed, how things are going, there's hotels directly next door.
Yep.
So if it's like, hey, I'm going to take my break and I'm going to go take a nap, you can take like a 30 to 45-minute nap. And I think it's one of those things that I find is truer and truer the older I get.
Yep.
I put so much more significance on my sleep at an event than literally anything else. So I'm very much, I'm getting my sleep. So I will have sleep regardless. But a lot of people, it really is just, I've got to go to 3 different seminars tonight. I have to do XYZ throughout the day. So
yeah,
I'm just going to get it where I can and pray.
Okay.
And that's, I think, common
Yeah.
enough. And that's where I think it really sort of sets itself apart from other events is there's a lot that you can only do here. If you're a Catan player, Worlds is there, so you kind of have to plan based on what your schedule is for the event, where you're going to sleep. Me, I'm like a hard 9 o'clock end time, in bed, out for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, it is, where can I get sleep? I can sleep on the ride home if I have to.
Yeah.
Like that kind of deal.
No, it makes sense because the city is basically alive for the entirety of this event. Like I've known people that have chipped teeth at GenCon thanks to the ravages of what has been termed the fuck it bucket.
Yep.
And it becomes an interesting time. And if you're not the kind of booth that needs to do that nightly reset, that does open you up to the opportunity to go out and enjoy different things, experience different things, even if it's just something as simple as like, okay, the event ends at 6. If we hustle, we can make it to go see X, Y, or Z, right?
Exactly.
Go experience something, and that'll eat up a chunk of time. And you just got to budget accordingly. And like you said, this is a unique event. You have to know like who your people are and what they're going to want to do, and give them the opportunity to experience it for themselves. Now, as Gen Con winds down, is Sunday a short day, or is it still a 10 to 6?
So Sunday hall hours are 4 o'clock, which is great because it's a Midwest event. Everything's done by 4 o'clock anyways.
Yeah.
Now, the really interesting thing about Gen Con compared to like Magic Fest in the Midwest is no, they are actually there until 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
They're going, they're buying, they're looking for whatever deals they can. You're not going to get a whole lot in terms of like B2B deals at Gen Con compared to like sporting events or Magic Con, stuff like that. It's just too busy to really be able to get out and do that.
Yeah.
But Sunday is kind of, 4 o'clock, we're done, we're packing up, whatever. And Fern is very specific about loading and unloading. You cannot start packing up until 4 o'clock or you will get fined.
Mm-hmm.
Or so they say. Obviously, people pack up before then. Upper Deck has a ton of stuff for them to unpack to not start packing up ahead of time. And that's just a fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a shorter day. That's the plan. I don't know if that's because it is a Midwest event or because, hey, we're just done. We're dead. We're tired. We want to be over with. But yeah, it is a shorter day. Now, the loading and unloading is a lot more... Well, sorry, the unloading specifically is a lot more fly by the seat of your pants.
Okay.
The Indianapolis Convention Center has a massive loading dock area. They also encourage all of the vendors to park in the parking lot directly behind those loading docks. So for the smaller vendors, it's literally throw that shit on a cart and go.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't have to pull our car up. We're just taking cart loads out because by the time we go to the marshaling yard, wait at the marshalling yard for our turn, and then drive over, we could have been loaded up 4 times. For example, this year, I think we were out of the hall by 5:45, 6 o'clock. Packed up, gone.
Nice.
5:30 was what it was. It took us maybe an hour. And that's great.
Yeah.
And that's where things kind of, it's an event that's similar to anime events. It's so busy, you don't understand how actually exhausted you are until the inertia hits you.
Yeah.
When you're on the road and you're not constantly going and you're not preparing for the next day. And it's just like, we're on our way to the airport, we're on our way driving home, whatever the case is. And then it just slaps you. And that's when it's like, for me anyways, it's a weird kind of fatigue and nostalgia, because I'm like really glad that I got to experience Gen Con again.
Yep. Gen
Con's over. But I'm not excited yet for next year's Gen Con. It's like, I'm going to take a day or two to just kind of veg out. And especially for me, my big thing is, I'm cancer survivor, I'm immunosuppressed. I'm always sick after Gen Con. It doesn't matter. I could soak myself in bleach wipes and disinfectant. I will come out with some kind of infection. And that's one of the things that I think, in terms of the vendor side, doesn't get talked about a lot, is like the hangover afterwards, physically and mentally, after you're just doing this for 36 hours straight, for 3 days, or in the case of Gen Con, 12 hours a day for 5 days. So
yeah, it's definitely a unique experience compared to anything else that I've done. Because like I said, like Anime Central and Anime Expo are like the 2 largest conventions that I've worked. Anime Expo putting in like 100,000 people. Yeah. But it never seemed like it was that comparable to Gen Con from a vendor experience, because it's just people are moving all the fucking time. Nobody's lingering, really engaging. You're missing out on a lot of the industry conversations if you're not at one of the flagship booths that are meant to be there. So it's just like all you're there to do is basically just be a vending machine. Like somebody just starts on one side of the booth with money in hand, and by the time they get to the other side, it's been traded out for cards, and like that's it. That's the transaction. So I like the inertia for something like that definitely ends when they tell you the hall's closed and you're packing your booth and you're just sitting there looking at the aftermath and watching all the t-shirt towers come down. And then you're like, oh shit, we still have to pack up.
Damn it.
Yeah, we didn't hire people for this. We are.
Yeah.
We are the people.
Yeah. Awesome.
Exactly. But for something like that, or Anime Boston, ASEN, that nostalgia, that longingness kind of hits afterwards, because it's a short day. For us, those pack-ups are always pretty quick. The load out for vendors is also very quick for those events. ASEN being the most unique, where you can actually just drive your vehicle straight to your booth.
Yeah.
I think AX allowed you to do that as well if you were one of the large flagship booths, but the parking lot was so close that we could just make like one trip it with like a cart, right? So you're out of there at like 5:36. You're sitting down, you're eating dinner, and you're just doing whatever it is with the rest of your night. Usually just slamming Commander or Cube, and then it just kind of hits like the event's over, verify that we are all set up for the next year's one, and then as you're like sinking into your seat, it's just like, all right, let's be excited for thankful that this one's over. We've got a night's sleep in front of us before we fly out, and we get to be excited for next year's and start planning it, which is always wicked fun. Now, coming back from Gen Con, Indy's not a city that's going to roll up its sidewalks on Sunday, so you're not scrambling.
Yeah.
Right?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And it's interesting because there's even, after about 4 o'clock, there's actually people around the convention center there to direct traffic.
Ah, all right.
So they're actually routing people away from the convention center so that the people that are leaving can get out easily and then get into the general traffic and out. And I think that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
Now that is specifically like on the Lucas Oil side that they did that this year, where they told all the vendors to park where the loading dock was. Out front, they have like a designated area for Ubers to go to, similar to an airport. It's literally like an airport in terms of traffic and in terms of planning, which is really unique. about conventions because they do literally plan their downtown around this event, which I think is really cool because it does enable you to do things like that where, hey, we're not closing down, but we're making sure you can get the fuck out of here because we're done with you too.
Yeah, no, 100, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I'm trying to remember, like, A, B, you just enter traffic because it's Boston and nobody gives a shit. So best of luck to you. The only benefit you get as a vendor is that you can't park here, but you load in and out from underneath the building. So your loading docks are just at the bottom of an elevator. And you have to take turns doing it, which means everybody's going to pack their shit.
Yep.
So if you're going to take a while, you're going to lollygag, that's perfectly fine. That means you're probably going to be pretty streamlined. If you're if you're like us, all our trash is left at the booth because somebody's going to come around and pick it up. So all we have to do is sweep cases. Like, we're out of there in minutes, man. And, like, there's nobody there to stop us. And then we're out. It's nice.
We've done our thing. People are paid to do this. We're just going to dip. Yep. And that was similar to how Mini did it. Was, we'd leave all the infrastructure there for, I don't know, if you want some IKEA shelves, just take them.
Okay, yeah.
Because we're flying back and we're not taking that shit with us.
Exactly.
For sure.
Like, the way we stocked those booths was to sell everything, and if it didn't sell and it was sealed, then we broke it down to sell as best we could as individual pieces. Like the last big one was the Detective Pikachu stuff that we broke apart because the 2 packs inside were worth more than the entire fucking thing, so we just broke it apart, sold it as individual pieces, which meant when we got it, we shipped it direct from distro to the hotel. Yeah. Stocked the Detective Pikachu stuff, broke a bunch of it down to sell in cases, and then at the end of the day, we just pulled it all apart because buy listing it was going to be cheaper than bringing it home. Yeah. So we just busted it, buy listed it, and we were done with it.
Deuces, yeah.
Yep, exactly. So anything else for, like, the end of GenCon, like the come down from the GenCon high?
Not really. I think it's, just the recovery is longer. Yeah. I feel like you're just more exhausted. Just stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be similar to a Vegas, where it's just going to be wire to wire because you're there, you're in Vegas, you want to experience things, but so does everybody else who's in Vegas, so you're fighting with everybody else all the time for everything. You're in that convention center for like 8 to 10 hours a day, and then you've got to figure out what you're doing with the rest of your night, set up your trip as well, and then deal with flying in and out. So, like, that event seems, from a Magic perspective, seems fairly comparable.
Yeah. No, it's definitely true.
All right. Ready for picks?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Do you want to go first, or do you want to hold on to talk about your banned and restricted announcement?
I'll go first to talk about my banned and restricted announcement. So 2 cards in this recent announcement were hit, neither of which was the One Ring, because anyone who thought they were going to ban that was, frankly, an idiot, in my opinion. Yep. It took them like 2 years to ban Hogak. It wasn't really 2 years, but Hogak was a problem.
Yeah, this was not the BNR to hit that card.
No, and Urza was a problem, and instead they banned Mobile for Urza. It's their hot new set as Lord of the Rings. They think it's going to be the greatest selling set ever. Well, you're not going to do that if the most important card in the set is banned in every format. So naturally they kept it. But we unbanned 2 things. Mind's Desire in Legacy and Preordain in Modern. Now, why this is important is, 1, it indicates a very important shift in philosophy for the BNR list, that they're willing to take cards off. Mind's Desire is a trap. That card is dog water. It is not good in Legacy. It's too expensive. Storm has better options. It's more efficient. Preordain might also kind of be a trap in Modern. I don't know that it's good enough. But similar to when Jace and Bloodbraid Elf got the unban, and I picked Dreadbore because I'm like, this is a card lateral to these that will see an improvement, I'm picking Snapcaster Mage. Why? Well, everyone's already trying to make some Delver list with Dreadhorde Arcanist a thing. Snapcaster used to play in that deck in Legacy. I think maybe you could see a surge here. Not only that, as I iterated in, I believe it was January when we looked, the card's too cheap. It's like $10 now. It is, I don't want to say it's unplayably bad, but it is not efficient enough to actually see play in Modern. Enter our good friend Preordain, a card that always loves being cast multiple times and that is just really good advantage. Yeah. We are, yes, sitting on about our all-time low. at a low of $11 on TCG Player right now for the only art that matters with Tiago Chan. I don't know if this card has legs in Modern or not. It picks up equipment really well in Legacy, always has. Less the case in Modern, but it does importantly give you flashback and an additional cost of Preordain. Now, obviously, Arcanist lets you kind of do that for free, but Snapcaster has inverse stats. We've got a 2 front and a 1 butt, so we're a little bit more aggressive. Now, in terms of timeline, that's going to be kind of the interesting thing, because we've actually started to see Snapcaster show up in a 1 or 2 of in some Modern lists, in challenges, leagues, whatever. So we could be a little bit quicker, especially considering that this Pro Tour or RCQ season is, yet again, Modern. I think that does a really good job of giving us visibility on this card.
Yes.
This week alone, I've probably helped 4 or 5 people build Modern Murktide of some variety. 2 of them did get 2 Snapcasters. Obviously, anecdotal, doesn't indicate a larger trend, but it is important to think about how the LGS level is impacted by this. So it's a card that I think you'll probably want no more than like 4 to 6 of, because I do think it is a card that we're going to pair. In terms of timeline, we've got the next 3 months to kind of effectively use this as a pump and dump.
Yeah.
This isn't something that I think has long-term legs, but it is something that I think sees a little bit of a surge because, again, a card adjacent to it has been unbanned. This was a card that was very popular with Snapcaster back in the day when it was very briefly legal in the format, and we don't know what this is going to do to the format, more importantly, which is very interesting because it hasn't really existed as it stands. Is Expressive Iteration just better than Preordained? Sure. You know what goes really great with Expressive Iteration? Casting it again with a Snapcaster Mage. So I think this is one of those opportunities where people are going to try to innovate for better or worse. They're going to start with venues that have already been explored in other formats. Dreadhorde Arcanist, prime example. Snapcaster Mage, another prime example.
Yep.
All it takes is 1 or 2 good finishes at an RCQ for this card to go to $15 to $20. Now, I think that this is also one of those cards that, frankly, holding on to 4 to 6 long term is not the worst thing in the world because the card will always have liquidity. Between casual players, EDH, whatever, there are plenty of ways for you to be able to profitably unload this card. So I think, again, we're looking at 4 to 6 timeline within the next 3 months.
Yeah.
And our outs realistically are going to be open marketplace or trade binders. Is probably your best bet. It's also the kind of thing that if you're grinding on the RCQ scene, maybe have a couple in your binder just in case you need to even out a trade, something like that. It's the kind of thing that people, similar to, when we talk about how Path or Delver, foil Delvers were a $10 bill forever. You need to even out a trade, here's a foil Delver. That's kind of the slot that I see Snapcaster starting to occupy during Modern RCQ season, especially if we start getting more advantage cards off the unbanned list or get more printed, which seems to be what's going to happen. It's my thoughts.
No, I like Snapcaster as a look forward to the Modern format. If anybody's been paying attention to just the stats that have been coming out on Twitter from the Pro Tour up to now in regards to what's going on in the Modern format, you're going to see basically a trend towards Rakdos Scam obviously being the most popular deck in the format. Its win percentage is basically like 50% plus against the majority of the field. The analytics basically support the fact that if you're going to be playing Modern and you have the cards for that deck, you should be playing that deck, which means it's a format warping deck, and eventually WotC should take some kind of step to adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
Whether or not that happens, TBD, but the moment something changes is the moment that a card like Snapcaster Mage really gets to shine, because it is fairly oppressed right now. It is very difficult to maintain card advantage. Well, I would say card parity.
Yeah.
Even before you start getting advantage with the way that Rakdos Scam operates, because they're going to strip everything from your hand, which is cool. That means the fodder is there for Snapcaster Mage in the graveyard. But that's not really what Snapcaster is meant to do. It's meant to give you another bite at that apple. So picking up Snapcasters now is going to be great because you're going to be hedging your bets between now and the November list, which is when I believe they're going to review all formats again, right before Eternal Weekend, basically. And they're going to maybe adjust the format. And if the format adjusts, then Snapcaster can take over. Between now and then, though, we are hoping that everything kind of stays steady. And it's difficult to imagine that Murktide, a deck that was effectively like 51% against the format, is really going to be an up-and-comer with no changes and no additions, just preordained. So I like the idea of picking up Snapcasters between now and November. I think the only difference is I'm fine going deeper, but that's because I'm the kind of person that owned like a dozen of them.
Oh, yeah, same.
When they were worth more per ounce than gold.
Yeah.
And I haven't traded or sold many of them off. They've just gone into commander decks, etc. They are not lost profit for me. They are just infinite utility.
Yep.
I don't mind that I didn't move all of them or most of them.
Yeah.
I'm happy with the ones that I have. And I'm happy to see that this card has the opportunity to come back. They gave it something to do in Preordain.
Yep.
One of the things to note is when you're looking at Ponder and you're looking at Preordain, traditionally Ponder is it's weird to put it this way, but more of a fair card. It's less of a combo-centric card. Preordain is the more combo-centric card, though you will see both of them in combo decks.
Yeah, naturally.
And yeah, it's just like the philosophy of what those cards do. Looking at 2, scrying 2, and then drawing is much different than rearranging 3 and drawing, or shuffling and then drawing.
Grabbing one off the top.
Yeah, the scry favors a little more looking for very specific elements of what you're trying to do, which favors combo, which doesn't quite exist in Modern right now. That's also part of the problem is we don't have a Storm deck. And like cool, Pyromaster's Ascension works really well when, again, all the cards are being put into your graveyard because that's the check when you cast the next one, but not good enough against Scam. It's just going to pull you apart.
Yep.
Which makes Snapcaster Mage a difficult ask. But like you said, this is more of a hold for later rather than now. So I would buy in. I would just go a little bit deeper. And I've always been like a firm believer in this card in the Modern format.
Great.
Like Bolt, Snap, Bolt, great line. Path, Snap, Path, still great.
Very good.
We're just in a spot right now where it's difficult for anything to really get a foothold if you're not able to recur the lost advantage from being scammed out with the One Ring. Like the One Ring is the only thing that allows you to rebuild advantage, and that doesn't really play with Snapcaster. They're not the same kind of deck. There is this deck floating around called the One Demir, but like not really.
Yeah, it's
not
trying.
really where we need to be. Exactly, it's trying, but it's not quite there. And I don't. Until we see a shift in the Modern format, I don't quite see Snapcaster getting there, but I would rather buy in now and be ready for it than trying to play catch-up, because being on the crest of the wave is where you want to be. You don't want to be cresting with the wave. Like you don't want, like once that happens, you're too late. You want to be riding that wave in.
Yeah.
So I like the look now and then the hold. For me, I'm sticking with Commander. This time I'm looking at a big goofy white enchantment in True Conviction. And this is a card that maybe people know from playing Standard. Maybe they've forgotten about it. 3 triple white. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. That's it. That's the tweet.
Yep.
The market value on this thing right now is about $4. And for a while, it was just kind of climbing infinitely until it got a signature spellbook. There it is, printing. In the Gideon list, then it tanked, and it's been coming back ever since. So this has been on my list for almost exactly a year. I added it August 6th of 2022 when Card King was buying 42 for $1.35. There are 134 LP and near mint listings on TCG, and the market price was around $3.57. When I took my notes for the cast, CK was buying 29 at $2.25, so that's a drop in by quantity, but like almost double by price. And there are 141 listings on TCG Player for $4.20. So almost the same amount of listings with a price increase of about 60-ish%, which is
Pretty
great. Exactly. We've seen long-term growth on this card, and that's exactly what we want after reprints. We just want strong, steady growth, and that's what the stocks graph shows. It's just strong, steady growth. And right now we've just hit a little bit of a plateau and a dip, but as we talk about this card, it'll kind of become clear as to why that is. Because, and as far as Commander is concerned, this plays in white-based decks looking to enter the combat step. And this is another great example of reading the card explains the card. There's not a lot of nuance to True Conviction.
Isn't.
Yeah, your plan A is to enter combat, and your plan B is to declare attackers. It's real difficult to suss that one out. Real difficult. The reason we're coming back round on this is that we're starting to see some more ways to find this card from within your deck, cheat it into play, or go over the top with it and end games. So the big one that we just got is Onyxia, Hand of Erebos. That's the new hotness. It's coming out of the Commander Masters Abzan enchantment-based precon for the Commander Master set. And this card allows you to cheat or rebuy True Conviction when it enters the battlefield or attacks, and basically lets you to declare it's clobbering time.
Sure is.
So, for those that don't know, because this card is actually kind of interesting, you just got to find it real quick. Onyxia basically just allows you to reanimate enchantments out of your graveyard as 3/3s. Oh, where'd it go? It disappeared on me. I'll figure it out later. Right? And that's it. So we have a new commander and a color scheme and a precon putting downward pressure on supply because the deck does what this card wants you to be doing, and we've already seen this deck do well on the SCG Commander channel. It shows that it's been showing out brilliantly that this deck is meant to enter combat with your enchantments. It's not meant to fiddle fart around. It's not looking to pillow fort. It's just looking to mush you. And Stephen Green mushed. I believe a deck similar to it, if not the precon immediately, a deck similar to the precon was also on game nights around the same time and also did very, very well. And when GenCon was happening, we had spoiled that weekend the white Craterhoof Behemoth in Moonshaker Cavalry, and it gives flying instead of trample and the same +X+X, and you're hard-pressed to convince anyone that that card is worse than Craterhoof. And giving your entire squad of little tokens, trample, and double strike is a very easy way to end games. So we're at a point now where we have continued pressure from WotC to enter combat with white-based decks, and if that's the identity that they are crafting for the color, True Conviction is a very real pillar of that plan. Now, as far as timeline is concerned, this has been on a rise for some time now, like we saw in the stocks graph, and it starts back in Ikoria, and it sees slow, steady movement from below $2 to $4.20 when I was taking my notes. And at the moment, CK was buying this for 53% of market price, but they had none in stock. That's why the price was so high. Right now, they're buying it for about $1.50. So, for about $1.50. So they have been restocked. But the moment they zero out, this jumps up to be about 50 to 60% of market. And that is compared to the 35% back in 2022. So that goes into that shift, right? So in the next few weeks, this was my prediction, that CK would raise their price in an effort on their end to draw in more copies, as it seems like they were having problems acquiring it and keeping it in stock. And if I take a look quickly, sorry about this, I'm just going to check what CK's stock level for True Conviction looks like. If I had to guess, because they're still buying 24, but they've dropped the price down to $1.50, they probably have about 12 or 16. Nope, that's a lie. They have 3 left at $5. So we're back down at 30%. So the moment they sell out, which should be now in about a week, this price is going to jump from $1.50, probably closer to the $2.50, $3 that we were just talking about. So if we get in now, ahead of Wilds of Eldraine and the Moonshaker Cavalry, This should allow us to flip back to CK or the open market for profit almost immediately, though it might take some time as demand on TCG Player is pretty low. That was the only real caveat to this when I was taking my notes. CK was buying a decent amount, still is. Price is higher now than it is now. But again, we'll see it raise in time, like we know. The velo on TCG Player was just really, really low, selling like single-digit copies a day. I'm going to go back and scan this. And now that we're in the throes of Eldraine spoilers, the Moonshaker Cavalry hype has pretty much died down. So we've got to kind of wait for it to come back around. Yeah, like we're seeing on average like 6 a day.
Not bad.
No, not really. The market's also dropped a little bit, which means that like interest on this has cooled. But once people are able to get their copies on Moonshaker Cavalry, up. This machine will go burr. Reprint equity on this card. We've seen it in Commander products already. We saw it in Commander 2014 and something called the Starter Commander decks. I don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah, and Secret Lair?
Yes, it was in the Transformer Secret Lair.
Transformers one, that's right, with Allspark on it. That's the one to go for.
Yep. And Signature Spellbook, Gideon. And basically Commander product just really looks like it's home. This is very, very difficult to cast in Limited. It is impactful, but by the time you're able to cast it, you should have won the game, basically, so I can't imagine we'll see it there. So I imagine it's just going to be on the sidelines in Commander stuff, most likely precons. By quantity, I have like my bunch from playing Standard and several from Commander via buys, but I'd probably look to fill out a dozen because it's a cheap pickup. And like I mentioned up top, WotC has said that they are still trying to figure out exactly what they want to do with white, but with Moonshaker Cavalry in front of us, with the Abzan deck that we just got, it looks like Enter Combat is where they want white to be. They want it to be efficient with that, and this plays into that plan and is a very real option. The other thing is it's typo agnostic. So unlike some of your other options for buffing creatures, this one just kind of goes. You can make a bunch of different types of tokens, whatever you want. Play a bunch of different types of creatures in your white decks. Go for it. It's not difficult to splash into Boros and some other options as well, and just allows you to just kind of win combat. It's not even like this big, dumb, goofy, casual-only thing. This is a real card.
It's just slamming you in the face with what it does.
Yep, exactly. It's just a very real card with very real commanders behind it.
Yeah.
So
I love cards like this because it's something that's affordable, approachable, and very like battle cruiser EDH, which, as we talk about ad nauseum, means you effectively have an infinite audience.
Yeah.
The liquidity is there. The price is very good. And in terms of reprints, I mean, looking at all of the stuff that has been mass reprinted lately, that has appeared in multiple sets in the last 3 years, this one's kind of dodged all that.
Yeah.
It has been reprinted a couple times in some relatively high-ish print run sets. Spellbook was a disaster, obviously.
Yeah, it's still on shelves.
Still on shelves.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of thing that I think even at $2 to $3, we're pretty much at our floor. You're never going to lose out on this.
Nope.
And you'll always have an out.
Yeah.
Because despite the low liquidity, obviously, compared to cards that are selling dozens of copies a day, this market doesn't go anywhere.
No.
This market is here. It's not doing anything other than existing.
Yep.
So it's always there for you.
Yep.
Solid.
Two things. One, Onyxia, Hand of Erebos, so the commander that I mentioned.
Yeah.
It currently has like 2,100 lists on Rec. It's basically people who bought the deck and did a little bit of modification.
Tweaking, yeah.
Yeah, 20% of those decks contain True Conviction. So Onyxia, Hand of Erebos. I'll bring this up for people to see and also give it a read. It is a 4/4 with Menace. It says, other enchantment creatures you control have Menace, and whenever Onyxia enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to one target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature in addition to its other types. So when you cheat True Conviction into your graveyard and then you play Onyxia or attack with it, you can reanimate effectively your True Conviction right then and there. So that's what I meant earlier when I said, like, this is just a way to cheat it in. This is how we're doing this now. This is what we're looking at. And this is kind of like that power level. The other thing about True Conviction is I think This is I'm not reaching for this one, I don't think, but if it keeps moving the way it is, the price is going to sneak up on people, and it's basically going to become Iroas God of Victory. I don't really believe in that card, but CK buys it all day long for $10. Creatures you control can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, so it gives your creatures menace, and then prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. Like, that's decent. It's good. It makes sure your creatures win combat. Not a lot of people are playing this as their commander anymore. It generally exists in the 99, but it's still a $10 card from around that same era of Magic.
Yeah.
So the more we get this downward pressure from WotC, the more opportunity there is for True Conviction to become a card with a real price like Iroas. So
yeah,
that's where I'm looking.
And I think that's especially when you're talking about specs now, as we get into, Reserve List is the only thing worth holding on to. Modern cards are worthless. The singles values are going down. Yep. I think this is, you talking about like the design philosophy. I think that's a big impact that people need to start looking for in their specs is what's WotC kind of doing besides shitting on the game? What can we kind of plan for in the future? And that's why, picks like this I think are great.
Yeah, thank you. So that's it for True Conviction. And I think that's going to take it away for this week. So unless you got anything else.
Nope.
We are MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. If you want to reach us, well, me, I am at Halt I am Reptar on Twitter. Still banned?
I might be getting back soon. We'll see.
Okay. Soon you might return. But until then, see you next week.